Hi there. If you've watched any of our videos, then you know it. I'm Yanni Lunga, that's Connie Steele, and we're bringing you corporate podcasting advice, resources, and strategies. And in this video, Connie, what are we going to talking about?
We are going to be talking about beyond podcast hosting. Much of what we talked about is assuming if you want to do a corporate podcast, right, and you're going to be hosting that in order to help drive business outcomes. But podcasting itself, there's so much more that you can leverage. You can leverage this audio medium to support you in other ways. So, Jan, let's start off with you. I'd love to get your perspective, given you've been in the space for quite a few years, almost like closer to sort of the beginnings of it. How have you personally leveraged podcasting outside of just doing a show to support everything you've done? And how have you seen others leverage it successfully?
Yeah, I've been doing this since 2014, and I have to say, this is one of my all-time favorite topics, especially because it's an area where I feel that so many people, companies who leverage podcasting actually are leaving stuff on the table. Stuff can be opportunities, can mean money, can be exposure, and can mean business. So happy to be here and sharing some of my thoughts on this. The first thing, as you said, is there is a lot that goes beyond hosting a podcast. And the skills you are acquiring or you have acquired through hosting a podcast can become very valuable in other areas as well. The first one is public speaking. You can say, I would love to represent my company or our company around the country, around the world, but I need to work on my public speaking skills. Well, guess what? Hosting a podcast can help you with that because you become a better communicator, you become a better storyteller, and you also become a better interviewee, meaning if you don't limit yourself, so to say, to interview others, but you are going to get interviewed as well, that's where you really learn about being in the spotlight, meaning what if they ask you questions you weren't expecting, or how do you go about engaging with the audience when you are the guest? When is it too much time on the mic and you should pass the word to the host? All those kind of things are things that you're going to learn, sure, by hosting a podcast initially, but then you really are going to sharpen those skills by being a guest. It has happened to me several times, Connie, with some clients who originally approached me. And this, I have to say, I've seen it especially with authors. And Connie, you're an author, so I'm curious then to hear your thoughts on this. But it has happened a handful of times to me that I got approached by somebody who wanted to hire me for my consulting on podcasting. And when I asked them why you wanna or you would like to host a podcast, he or she would say, because I have a book coming out and I want to promote it. And I often found myself thinking and then sharing obviously those thoughts with them, saying, don't you think that you could achieve the same goal, meaning getting exposure for your book, without having to undertake many of the technical hurdles that go with hosting a podcast by being a guest? Because if you think about it, when you host, you may have to think about many different aspects or pieces of the podcasting puzzle. But when you're a guest, you just need to, well, obviously have proper equipment, but other than that, show up prepared and do a good job. And in most of those cases, those clients did end up hiring me, but not to help them with hosting a podcast, rather with being a guest, because each interview is an opportunity for an author to be in front of a different audience and discuss his or her book. And for a company that may not have a book, the same still applies. It's every interview you do as a guest, it's an opportunity for you to talk about your brand, your company, your products and services. Connie, what are your thoughts? Since you are an author, you're a podcast guest, and you're a podcast host, and you've done interviews as well.
I totally agree on that front. So, for lots of organizations, you're always looking for media exposure. And many times you might not have, the full budget to hire a PR firm, or maybe you do. It really just depends on really the level of investment and resources, candidly, your company may have to help you drive that awareness. And many people recognize that getting media outreach, landing media hits, right, is quite valuable. And so certainly more broadly, you see this shift where there's incredible value in getting yourself placed on relevant podcasts that talk about your topic, because right there you have an embedded and engaged audience that
Mm-hmm.
could completely align to your target customer. So if your marketing team slash PR team, even maybe social team, can help whoever those thought leaders are in your organization to be on those relevant podcasts as a guest, it gives you the opportunity to showcase again that value that you have, your expertise, your credibility, so that you can build the broader awareness of what it is you do, and then subsequently that can create those leads potentially, or that awareness and then leads for your business. And the thing is, being on a podcast is free. So a
Yeah.
lot of times, right? I know many people are trying to figure out what is the most cost efficient way to get exposure. This is a pretty valuable way to do it. It does come down to being strategic. It does come down to identifying the shows that best align to who your audience is, what message you want to convey. But again, thinking of being a guest to me is quite valuable. What
Yeah,
else would you
yeah,
say?
you're absolutely right. And to your point, Connie, of being strategic, I think that oftentimes earlier when I said, people, companies leave blank on the table, I think it's because they just think, well, we just want to get interviewed. So they just chase interview after interview after interview, but they don't take the time to actually think long term or think beyond podcasting and say, oh, who is the person who's going to interview me or us, or who is that company? Maybe they actually are contributing to a publication, and the readers of that publication would be exactly the type of people you would want to be in front of. So guess what? If they interview you for a podcast, or you interview them for your podcast, try to see if there is ways to collaborate so that you get featured also on the publication as well. Or maybe that company organizes an event. Maybe it's an in-person conference, or is a virtual summit, and they are looking for speakers. So when you go into the interview, don't just say to yourself, okay, I need to promote our software, my book, whatever, and then focus on the next interview. No, always make sure that you actually have even just 1 minute after the interview to have what is called the post-interview chat, and see, because oftentimes great things happen in that 1 minute or 2 minutes. Opportunities come your way. But if you just say, okay, thanks for the interview, let me know when it's published, bye, you may miss out on some of those opportunities. And the cool thing is that what we're talking about here applies to podcasting or podcast guesting, but it also applies to other spaces. So it applies to virtual summits, meaning if you're featured or interviewed for a virtual summit, most of the things we have shared apply. Is there a Facebook group that is filled with prospects, with ideal customers of yours? Why don't you reach out to the admin or admins and see if there are ways to collaborate? Perhaps they do a series of Facebook Lives where they showcase people, they interview, whatever. You may want to get featured for that. What about Clubhouse? Clubhouse has been hot for a few months, has been, in case you don't know, Clubhouse is an audio-only app that you can use for on your smartphone to have conversations. So to simplify, that's what it works like. So the speaking skills you have been working on, you're improving, as I was talking about earlier, you can put them into action in podcast guesting, in being interviewed for Facebook groups, being featured on virtual summits, conferences, but even by leveraging audio-only ecosystems like Clubhouse. So what we've been sharing here, even though we talked about, even in previous videos, not only in this one, but what we've covered that has been podcasting related, a good percentage of that also applies to you as a podcast guest, or outside of the realm of podcasting. So for things like I just mentioned, Facebook groups or LinkedIn lives or virtual summits and things of that nature. Connie, what are your thoughts on really trying to make the most of those skills and being strategic, as you said, so to really go after, sure, podcast guest interviews, but why not also virtual summits, interviews for Facebook groups, live streams for LinkedIn pages?
I think the key thing that's important to note based on what you shared earlier is that outside of just being the host, you said this, you've built a now valuable skill of which you can take that to build, honestly, it's relationship building. That when you are doing these media opportunities to be on others' podcasts, obviously you're sharing your point of view and your perspective with the hopes of there being benefit for your company. But the other side of the coin that you need to look at is that this could be a really great mutual value exchange and a relationship building opportunity between you and the host of the podcast that you're on, because they too have their network of people that could potentially support the objectives of the company that you're working at. So, so much of this is not, I'm going to go in, share my point of view and leave, to your point. It
Yeah.
is, hey, this is a great way to share insights. And how could you potentially help them? They may in turn want to help you further because they are so drawn to the story, the insights, the advice, the product, the case study, the stories, such that it will lead to really the opening of doors into other areas that you wouldn't have considered. So to me, that's kind of the big thing for you to walk away with, is that beyond being the host yourself, leveraging these other audio only platforms to share what you have is still at its core building an authentic relationship with the other person on the other side of the mic, which then leads to hopefully this positive domino effect for new serendipitous opportunities that you wouldn't have expected. So, Jan, anything else left to share on beyond podcast hosting and how to leverage audio in a different way to help your business?
Yeah, I would say two things to wrap things up. The first one is to have a hard look at this because, as you said, some great opportunities can come as a result of that. I've gotten clients through the guest interviews I've done. I was hired by some people who interviewed me and they were impressed by my expertise, how I go about things. I've gotten speaking opportunities both for virtual events, but also in-person events. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. So I think, as I said earlier, that if somebody or a company is hosting a podcast and they kind of just quote unquote limit themselves to that, so to say, they are missing out on many great opportunities. And then the second and final thing I would add is that over at flywheelassociates.com/podcasting, we have quite many resources related to corporate podcasting. But since here we've talked about many things from the perspective of being interviewed, there is also a way on that page to get in touch with us. So if you're somebody who represents a company that is interested in potentially going beyond beyond podcast hosting and being a guest, then please get in touch because we can help with that as well. As I said, for example, I've been hired several times by different clients and I've helped them with podcast guesting. And I know, Connie, you know a thing or two about this podcast guesting thing, huh?
I do. I've benefited from it myself and I've been able to form some amazing relationships. And really so much of this in the aspect of business is all of you guys are very aware. It's about building that village of support, that network that can help you get to that next level of traction that you're looking for in your business. And so, again, when you look at podcasting very holistically, it is this wonderful medium that helps you build authentic and intimate relationships such that it can get you to the next level in your business, whether you're creating the content to distribute and share, or you're sharing your content as a guest with others, of which they will then distribute and share. So to close, If you want to reach out to us for any help or just to get more insights, go to flywheelassociates.com/podcasting.